Our panellist tonight is past District 9520 Membership Chair Mark Huddleston, who's convened several membership seminars and has spoken to over 80 clubs on membership. Mark was instrumental in forming the newly chartered and very successful Rotary Club of Seaford, of which he is a charter member. It's now my very great pleasure to introduce our panellist, Mark Huddleston. Over to you, Mark.
Well, thanks very much, Caro. Good evening or good afternoon, as it may be the case over there in WA. It's a pleasure to be asked to tell a bit of this story of the Rotary Club of Seaford. So just to give you a bit of background into what I've been up to, I, for 3 years, held the district membership chair role here, as Caro currently does over there. And I finished that 3-year term on June 60 this year. So I've only been 3 or 4 months out of that role. Across that time, and even before I was a district membership chair, I actually spent a lot of time on this side of the microphone at seminars and presentations, talking at clubs, handing out the best ideas I could acquire on membership and best practice, recruitment and promotion. What I found though, and I'm sure anyone else who's held a district leadership role before will hopefully agree with this, is that district leadership roles are very much about leading horses to water, and you can disseminate the best ideas, but in the overall scheme of things, you really can't make people drink. And I think a lot of the ideas that I put forward and the conversations we had, they might have been taken by people back to clubs and then rejected at club level, and things never got tried. So I was always concerned that a lot of the best initiatives and ideas that were shared in membership conversations never really got a chance to be fully implemented. And it often crossed my mind, you know, I wonder if one day, if we could start a new club, lose all the baggage of the past and just start it today as if Rotary was being invented today, implement all of these best practice ideas and promotional ideas, modern way of doing Rotary, how well that might happen. Well, the opportunity came to me a few years ago to do exactly that. Just to give you a bit of a geography lesson, you all know where Adelaide is, and we'll just zoom in there a bit. Seaford is at the very southern point of the metropolitan area. That's the Adelaide CBD up there, so it's probably a 3/4 hour drive from Seaford to Adelaide. So we're, like I say, we're pretty much at the very bottom of the metropolitan sprawl as Adelaide area goes south, and a very, very rapidly growing area of Adelaide. It's actually, whilst Adelaide is currently divided by 2 Rotary districts, Seaford is the fastest growing region in District 9520, and it's daylight second. So we've been very fortunate to set it up in a region without any Rotary footprint, but also a rapidly growing area. So that's something we really had in our favour. So I came up with this idea that I would start a new Rotary club a number of years ago, and I can assure you there are a few snickers around the place. Why would someone want to try and start a new Rotary club in this current membership climate? Now, in our district, we have lost 10 Rotary clubs in just over the last 10 years, but I thought there was opportunity to try and do something a little bit different. Then on the 26th of November last year, the club was chartered with 21 members. It was a very exciting night. And we've just this last weekend celebrated our first birthday. That's our current president, Hannah, on the left, with our district governor, Bob, cutting a beautiful birthday cake we've had made. And you see the figures up there that we've chartered with 21 members 12 months ago. We inducted a 28th member on Sunday night. So we have actually had a net gain of 7 over this year, which I think is really exciting. What I'm going to do tonight is share with you my top 5 success secrets for the club. And I want to point out that these secrets or ideas or initiatives weren't really anything that we drew up prior to try and get the club up and running. It's something I can sort of say, looking back over the time, what we have found to be successful. Some of these things, in hindsight, I probably thought would have been successful, but there's some of these things that I'm about to talk about I perhaps hadn't fully considered and realised when we're trying to start the club would be as important. So let's just go through them quickly, and then I'll go through them in more detail. Number one, our motto at the club is less meeting, more doing, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Flexible and productive meetings is the second secret. The third secret is a low cost base to members. Number 4 is aggressive promotion. And number 5 is effective partnership. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about each of these 5 steps or secrets in a bit more detail. Let's start with the less meeting, more doing concept. Now, one of the things I've been banging on about for a long time when I had the role of district membership chair was my concern that the organisation of Rotary had become way too meeting centric, and everything we did seemed to have meetings at the centre of meetings were at the centre of the Rotary universe, and I felt very strongly that we need to have service at the centre of the Rotary universe and work everything around that. As such, this club, the Rotary Club of Seaford, has an extremely high value in hands-on service projects. I'm actually the club's service projects chair, and I spend a lot of my time seeking out opportunities for members to participate in hands-on projects. And that's just a small smattering you can see on the screen there of things we've been up to over the last year or so. And we continue to have a lot of hands-on projects that we can invite people along to. And I would suggest if the opportunity is there, rather than trying to get a guest or a visitor to come and see your Rotary Club functioning at a meeting, if the option is there, get them to come along to a service project or some hands-on activity so they can see Rotary in action, they can see Rotary in a different light. Flexible and productive meetings. Now, we're very fortunate that we had those council and legislation changes in 2016 that allowed clubs to, I guess, chart their own destiny a bit more with regard to how they met and how frequently they met. We don't have any of those old rituals and trappings that you'll see in many Rotary clubs. They're all gone. What we often do is combine a meeting with a service project. So the way we meet, and I'll explain this a little bit later, we have 2 meetings a month, and we meet on different times of the week. Our first meeting of the month is on the first Thursday night, and the second meeting of the month is on the third Sunday. Now, that can be a breakfast, it can be a lunch, it can be an afternoon tea, it can be an evening meeting. And this actual site that you can see the picture of there is a community garden that we've done some work to establish. And we've had a number of meetings or events where we go along, we do a working bee for a few hours on a Sunday afternoon. Then we just pull out tables, chairs, order pizzas, and we have a very casual meeting. And that's how we do a lot of our meetings. It's very productive. It's not just sitting around a table eating a schnitzel. Here are some of the things we don't do because we don't find that these are necessary in our meetings. So firstly, we don't meet weekly. There's no compulsory meal, there's no sergeant or fine session, no toasts, no raffles, no songs, no grace or any religious observances, no money box getting passed around. We're very keen that the money we raise comes from our community and not from our members. There's no presidential collar or bling or flags or bells anywhere. We don't have a head table. We will just sit together. We don't have a club bulletin. Now, I will just speak to that shortly when I get onto another screen as to what we do in place of a club bulletin. And here's probably one of the main differences between us and most Rotary clubs. We do not have guest speakers, and I put there in brackets for the sake of having guest speakers. The exception to that rule is we may get someone in from a district committee, for example, or from another club who has some expertise in a certain project or a certain event that we're interested in. So basically, we will only get guest speakers in if they are directly of value to something we're planning to do at the club. We don't have guest speakers just there for entertainment value to sort of fill in 20 minutes. The other exception to the rule is, of course, if we've sponsored someone to go on a youth program, Rilo Ripe and that sort of thing, we will always get them to come back and talk about their experience. So that's an exception to the rule. What do we do at meetings? We basically do a lot of blue sky thinking. We sit around and talk about what's coming up, what's happened. We go around the table, the directors and president all give a bit of a talk about what's going on. They ask for help. You know, we've got this on the weekend, who can come and help, this sort of thing. So if you think about your traditional club committee meetings and maybe sort of the occasional club assembly, our regular meetings are a bit of a version of that, where we just chat about what's coming up. So anyone who's coming along as a visitor immediately gets involved in the process of what we're doing, rather than coming to see a guest speaker who may actually have nothing to do with Rotary whatsoever. The low cost base to members is something very important to us. And I guess I don't really need to point this out to a lot of people, because as being Rotarians, you'd all know this, but obviously most club meeting venues have unavoidable meeting costs. A meal, and by the time you add drinks, raffles, fines, all those things, it can easily add up to $30 or so a week. That can easily add up to $1,500 or so per year. And something that I found really ironic, I guess, over my time as a district membership chair, was a lot of conversations had by club leaders that, we really need to do something about our subs. Our members can't afford their subs, they're too much. And I always found that really, really interesting, because by far the biggest cost a year of being a Rotarian in a traditional club is that meal cost that people pay every week. And it surprises me that clubs aren't doing more to look at those costs. We don't have those costs at all. I'll explain shortly what we do. And as a result, no one complains about subs, because we're not paying $1,500 or more per year in meals and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, if there's a husband and wife or partners coming along, well, they're paying double that a year. It's very, very expensive, excuse me. What do we do at the Rotary Club of Seaford? Well, firstly, we're only meeting twice a month. So even if we were meeting in a traditional sense in a pub or a restaurant or something, we'd only be paying half of what most Rotarians are paying. So we only meet twice a month. Our venues rotate. We don't ever have two meetings in the same venue in a row. And what we do is we don't meet in venues where meals are mandatory. So one meeting we may have, for example, in the Seaford Library. There's a lovely boardroom out the back where we're allowed to use that whenever we want. And we might meet there and members just bring a plate to share. There's a local soccer club that lets us meet there for free. They don't have catering there, but they have a bar. So obviously we can go to a bar and get drinks. We just order pizzas in or get hot chickens or something like that. So it's, when you spread that cost over the members, it might be $7 or $8 a head or something plus a drink. And people don't have to eat if they don't want to. So our meals are either optional, inexpensive, or members bring a plate to share. The other thing we do every now and then, we just have a meeting at a member's home. So we just, bring our own meat and have a barbecue or something like that. So this is the type of things you do when you are not obsessed with meetings, when you are more focused on service and getting things done, and you're not so fussed about how the meetings go. These are the sorts of things you can quite easily do. Let's move on to number 4, aggressive promotion, because this is something that's really important to me, and I think a hallmark of the success we've had in our club. Just firstly, we've got a very user-friendly, outward-facing website that is designed for the public. It's not designed for Rotarians. It's as you flick through the pages, it's all about simple information for Rotary. There's some diary dates on the front there. Those images, if it were live, up the top there sort of flash around and change the different pictures. And over on the right there, there's a members info button. So that's where we put things that, members want to download minutes and stuff like that, and links to other Rotary resources, that sort of stuff. I'll just show you these club uniforms we've got. And you can see there's a consistent pattern on the website with that sort of wave up there. So we have a lot of consistency in our branding and promotion. We are super aggressive on Facebook. Our club Facebook page has over 834 likes. I only checked that just before starting. That's 350 ahead of any other club in the district, and it's more than our district page. So I don't know how that compares with some of your own clubs, but we are very, very aggressive on Facebook. Almost every member of our club has a Facebook account. We post easily 4 or 5 times a week, often more, and that gets us a lot of coverage out there. Now, I mentioned before that we don't do club bulletins. We have a secret Facebook group, which is for intra-club communication. So bearing in mind, we do have a couple of members that aren't on Facebook, and we're cautious to make sure we include them by sending them emails, that sort of thing. There's a lot of communication and decision-making goes on this secret Facebook group that obviously only the members of the club and our assistant governor can see what goes on that page. So some people will think, oh, how do you communicate? How do you convey what's going on in the club if you're only meeting twice a month? How do you get that information across? Well, we use Facebook to do a lot of that communication. It works really, really well. We've had professional brochures designed and handed out. They go to all our barbecues. They do letterbox drops with them. We get that information out there very prominently. When we were first starting the club, we had some posters made up. Yes, you can be a Rotarian. We had these put up in notice boards and shops and things everywhere that any club can do this sort of stuff and get the message out there. This is just an example of a little flyer that a local community centre produces, and we sponsor that. That's our ad up there. Now, this costs us $100 to go to a circulation of 11,000 in the area, and that's for two issues. So it happens quarterly. So basically $200 a year for 4 distributions. Every time that's gone out, we have picked up a member from it. So not just a lead, but a member. So we're continuing on with this. We think it's very cost effective and been very successful for us. And a lot of it is about the wording. You know, one of the words, one of the texts on there that a new member said really got him into the club was where it says, our club is flexible, friendly and informal, and maybe quite different to what you think you know about Rotary. It focuses on volunteering, not meeting. So that's been very successful for us. We've got all the pull-up banners and things, and we keep them. They're always prominent when we have meetings and events, that sort of thing. Another thing we've got is just this little A-frame sign, which we always erect whatever we're doing, whether it's a barbecue or some service project, and it's got a different message on the other side there. Again, this is our work in a community garden that we've been working on, so that sign goes wherever there's any activity, and talks about, you know, what we stand for. Earlier this year, we got a brand new lovely marquee, 6 metres by 3. That's very prominent. You can see that from a long, long way away. It's really important, I think, to invest in good quality promotional material. I'll just tell you a very quick story. This again is the community garden that we've done some work in. We asked the organisers, you know, this is in conjunction with a local school, which is on the other side of that fence. What's something you could really do within this garden? Well, they needed a water source, so we decided to install a rainwater tank. We thought, oh, that's really good. That's really good real estate, that rainwater tank. We can't leave it like that. Let's put something on it. So we had this beaut sign made up about clean, fresh water being something that's a real priority for Rotary. So this is what I mean by being really aggressive with our marketing. We do spend a bit of money on it, but we really want to get our message out. It's really important when you're a new club in a new region that doesn't have that Rotary footprint to do it. Now, where that, you can't see it from this image, but where that rainwater tank and sign is only about 15 metres from the school kiss and drop. So every morning, 500 parents dropping off kids within 15 metres of that sign, and the same in the afternoon. So we get some really good exposure from that. Now, I just want to wind up with a bit of a talk on effective partnerships. This is something very important to us as well. And perhaps some of these logos are a little bit out of date. There's probably some new organisations we work with, but we find it really critical to work alongside of businesses, charities, government and non-government organisations, local council, that sort of thing. And it's really been worthwhile for us. And I just want to give you a few examples of some of the things we've done. The Southern Stars Netball Club, the lady on the right, you might have recognised her from that image before, is our current president, Hannah. She is one of the coaching directors at this netball club. The lady on the left is Denise, who is our youth programs director. They came up with this idea of sponsoring a best team person sort of award. So this is an award for the most goals shot or the best on-field player. This is an award for the person who helps out most around the club, the person who helps with the coaches and helps with some of the admin and cleaning up. And we see it as a bit like a service above self award for a netballer. It didn't cost us anything but a couple of certificates. We worked again with partnership with a local sporting goods retailer, and they gave us some goods and a voucher to give out to these girls. Importantly, though, we got to present these at their presentation night, and there were 400 young netballers there, and their parents and their coaches and their siblings and administrators of the club, that Denise got to talk about Rotary youth programs too. So that's a fabulous partnership to have, and it costs us virtually nothing to do that, but a bit of time and effort. And the girl on the left there attended RIPEN earlier this year. So we've got an instant group of people who can go to our youth programs. Another partnership I want to talk about, a small local charity called Breakfast Bellies. They're in the food security sector, and they provide school breakfast programs to some of the local schools, and also emergency hampers to families in need. And at Christmas time, they do a big thing. They hand out hampers. We donated some of those Rotary Foundation puddings. That photo was at our charter night, actually. So it's really good to be working with Breakfast Bellies. And, you know, those puddings, they just look sensational. A Rotary wheel on them. These families are getting those and knowing, hey, you know, Rotary's working in your community. Moana, Seaford and Moana Business and Tourism Association. We partner with those to have regular business breakfasts, and we have picked up 2 members from those as well. And our local council, which is the City of Onkaparinga, we've got some really good contacts there who give us the heads up whenever there's big functions. So we actually get to work at a lot of youth events. So not only is that good for the fundraising, but it's just great to have Rotary in front of families and younger people. We can again talk about Rotary youth programs, and that's really exciting as well. So I'm going to wind it up there, gone over time as it is, but just a few key points. And I give this talk about Seaford to a lot of clubs, and I think a lot of them think that it's all too hard, the way we're doing this. But if you just break it down into a few smaller steps, and I asked, is it possible that your club can meet less and do more? Is it possible that you can replace occasional meetings with hands-on work? Is it possible you can reduce the cost burden on your members? Is it possible you can lose some of those meeting rituals? Is it possible you can put more effort into club promotion? And is it possible you can build more meaningful partnerships? Well, I think all those things are possible. You don't have to completely turn your club into a new version of Seaford, but you can try all those things. Or is it all a bit too hard? And the final slide I'll leave you with is my favourite all-time slide, which I think very beautifully represents Rotary's challenges at the moment. Where the guy on the left is supposed to be the Rotarian, he's saying you're going to have to change to fit into the system, and the dudes on the outside, well, they just want to know why the system can't change so they can all fit. At the Rotary Club of Seaford, we have changed the system and more people are fitting. So I'll wind it up there, Caro. Thanks very much for listening, guys.
Thank you, Mark. Just looking for questions here. Please feel free to put them in the question box. We do have a few that have come in on the text channel. Mark, the question here is, paraphrase, your PR budget. How much do you spend on PR in an average year?
I've got to be honest, we don't actually have a set PR budget over the year. When, I guess a traditional club has had potentially 10, 20, 30, 40 years to build up their promotional inventory. When you're a new club, you really need to hit the ground running and spend some coin and get some of this stuff out there. You know, we haven't got another 30 years to wait to be able to do some of these things. We really need to hit it out there. Now, I know some people don't agree with this, but I'm just going to say it straight out. We don't have any problem in spending, and I've said this at district level before as well, so not just our club, a responsible amount of community funds we raise on promotion. And that has been something traditionally frowned upon in some Rotary circles. But I would simply give the example of any charity that you see advertising on TV or billboards or radio, they all spend part of the money they get from the public, from the community, on outgoings, on promotion. That's what they have to do to get more people interested. And we don't have a problem with doing that as well. So we don't have an ideological problem with spending responsibly some money that we get from the community.
Fair enough. Question: a couple of our audience would like to get copies of your presentation.
Certainly, I'm more than happy to email you the PowerPoint, Caro, and you can share that wherever you like. No problem at all.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. I think it's great to be able to pass your message on. because it's a very, very powerful message. Mark has a question here. How do we change attitudes as many, and I'll read it out, as many are self over service? How to change attitudes as many are self over service?
Look, I couldn't agree more, and I've been actually pushing that barrow quite a bit for a while. That a lot of the things that are holding us back are people who are actually more concerned with comfort and maintaining the status quo than putting the club and the community first, and that is entirely about service above self, or vice versa. And to be honest, I don't. Now, this is not an issue I have in my current club, of course, but it's the language I have suggested people use when they go back to their clubs with these ideas, and they find that a lot of ideas are stymied because this is the way we've always done it, and blah blah blah. Just ask the question. Is that mindset about self or is it about service? Just ask the question, and I think you find when you throw that at someone, they have a bit of a double take and actually have a bit of a think about it. And I mean, we could talk about the need for change all night. I know you haven't got all night, but what it keeps coming back to for me is that if the organisation is still going to be thriving in 20 or 30 years' time, it's obvious to me that the organisation that we have in 30 years' time is going to be very different to the organisation we have now. But we can't wait that 30 years to change it. We need to start changing things now, or we won't be here in 30 years. So, that cliff face that we often hear about is most certainly coming. And again, it's not about changing a whole club 180 degrees in one hit. It's about just trying some of these little things and giving it a go.
I guess that first step sometimes is the one that's a little difficult. So here's a question. How do you fundraise?
Believe it or not, the ubiquitous sausage sizzle is quite high on our list. We have look, more funds come through sausage sizzles than anything else. Interestingly, there's a brand new Bunnings that opened in Seaford at about the same time our club opened, and we've partnered with them in a lot of things. The relationship we have with Bunnings is about so much more than sausage sizzles. They are really helpful to us. They help us out with projects. For example, that rainwater tank I showed you a picture of before, they donated that, so that was $570 we didn't have to spend on a tank. Gave us a bit more money to spend on the sign. So Bunnings that's a part. We don't see that as sausage sizzles only. We see it as a partnership. So we do raise a lot of money through that. We get a lot of those catering sort of events for council events. And I think it's really important that we don't just look at these events solely as a fundraiser, but as an opportunity for exposure. So we've got to make sure we've got the people there in the uniforms and the hats and the, have the good flyers and people knowing whether you call it the elevator speech or, the right way to talk to prospective members. We have just done some wine bottling, which was quite successful for us. We raised about $1,600 from that. And that was a member who actually came to us from another club, and she did that at her other club, and she offered that for us. And we've been selling those Rotary Foundation puddings and cakes and things. So we do have a few other ways to fundraise, but without doubt at this stage, the old sausage sizzle is number one on the list.
Sausage sizzle will certainly come in handy.
Yeah.
Looking at a different aspect of the club, obviously the issue of age is one that does occupy the minds of many in Rotary. So what's your age profile?
Okay.
And how many of your members have previously been Rotarians with other clubs?
Sure. The average age is 49. We have members in every age band. We've got members in their 20s, 30s, 40s, more members in their 40s than any other group, 50s, 60s and 70s. So it is truly a multi-generational club. We're 2/3 women, and I don't have a problem with that at all. They are amazing workers. They're amazing networkers. They're a fabulous asset to our club, and probably quite a different culture to what you often will see in Rotary. What was the other question you asked about?
past Rotarians with other clubs.
Oh, yeah, okay. When we first started the club, that started with 6 Rotarians. 3 were existing Rotarians that transferred in from other clubs. I was one of them. However, and this is something I wasn't really expecting, but was really exciting, we also had 3 former Rotarians who had been out of Rotary for quite some time, and I dare say had given up on Rotary. They were, their Rotary days were behind them. But when we started doing our promotional campaign to do the initial, interest meetings and that sort of stuff to get the club going, those little ads that I showed you before that we sent out with the flyers, when you see one of those Rotary, if you're been a Rotarian 30, 40 years ago even, once you see that Rotary wheel, you obviously know what it stands for. So we were able to get some people interested early on. And because they saw the model that we were operating, they were more than happy to give it a go because they could see how different it was from the old Rotary that they'd come from. Since then, we have got another Rotarian who's come in from another club. So we have 7 former members, and they all bring us an amazing wealth of Rotary knowledge. So that's really great. Just the other thing, quickly on demographics, you didn't ask the question, but I think this is really worth touching on. If you look down the traditional Rotary sort of classification checklist, you won't find a lot of the classifications necessarily as what we have in our club. We have probably well over half, maybe 3/5 of our membership base are from what I would loosely call the social services sector. They are teachers, they are nurses, they are carers, they are welfare, like social workers, advocates, people who in their daily life are helpers and carers. These are people that bring something really special to Rotary, but we often, when we do our recruiting, don't see these people because they're not in the shop fronts along the main street. These are people sort of hidden in the back rooms somewhere or out of public view. And these people, it was not a deliberate thing. It's just that we've attracted them. These people are very well connected, and because they are naturally caring people, they just bring such a quality to Rotary because they're dealing with society's sort of challenges in their day-to-day lives, and they're just so well connected with what's going on in society. So that's been something really unique for us as well.
How do you manage, and this is one I'm interested in, how do you manage the tall poppy syndrome where you sit alongside other clubs that may not have, that may, for a variety of reasons, not be going quite so well? How do you manage that?
Interesting. That's a really interesting question. Because when I was the district membership chair, it was my problem. And some clubs in particular, there are a couple of neighbouring clubs very close geographically to the Seaford area that are in real strife. And they, had a bit of a bee in a bonnet that we were doing this because, we're apparently eating into their territory and all this sort of thing and attracting the people that they weren't able to attract, but that's another story. We've just worked as closely with them as we can. We have a few rules in place that we don't promote ourselves outside of a certain sort of geographic boundary. I mean, Rotary clubs don't really have those boundaries anymore, but we don't want to be trying to take members away from them. So we don't do anything to promote ourselves there. We're very careful if we get offered jobs, projects sort of in another club's sort of patch. Just because there were a few tensions when we started up. I know most Rotary clubs don't have to worry about that, but we always, if someone comes to us for help from another area, we will always say, you should first go to so-and-so club and just give them the option first. If they don't want to do it, well, we'll do it. I think you've just got to set the best example you can. And if they want to continue down a path of, now I've used this term before and some people like it, some people don't, but I'm just going to say it anyway. If they want to continue down the path of toasting, praying, finding and singing their way to oblivion, well, they can just do it. if they're not going to change the way they do things, we're just going to keep doing the way we do things, and trying to keep innovating, and work with them as best we can.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Corporate memberships. You're in what I understand to be a suburban area,
Yes,
but mainly residential. Do you have corporate memberships?
we don't. It's certainly. I mean, I know how it works, and I've seen a few models where it works quite well. I guess should the opportunity present itself, we would be happy to do that. We've actually got one member in particular. His name's Ian. He is one of those former Rotarians that have been out of Rotary for many, many years, that came back in because we started the club. And he's actually the oldest member of the club. He's 74, but he is a marketing guru. His background is all in marketing, and he can talk the paint off a wall. He's one of these guys that can go into a business and start talking about Rotary, and we're not all good at that, but he is really good at it. He's really good at going and asking for sponsorship, that sort of thing. He just loves it. And he's very keen to look at corporate options, and he is definitely the right person for us to do that. And it's something we may explore, but at this stage, we're not having any trouble sort of attracting people into the club. Now, I was having Kara will remember I had a brief conversation about this before the webinar officially started. We haven't actually had to do any serious recruiting since we started the club. We've found that we've just been able to attract people in. So whilst we certainly do want to grow the club, we're not going gangbusters out there trying to find people. We're finding that people are trying to find us, because we're exposing the club and we're promoting ourselves so heavily. And people are seeing, because we're so active in the community, people are seeing us in action. And we've actually picked up a lot of members by actually being prominent and doing some, working bee or barbecue somewhere, and people come up and ask a question and they just want to join. So that's a roundabout way of answering the question. We're not seriously looking at corporate membership, but it's something that we, it may cross our path.
Well, thank you, Mark. A question from Mark. Just had three more questions arrive, so this is going very well. Question from Mark. How much do you give to the Rotary Foundation, and how do you raise funds for this?
We gave our first US $1,000 sort of May, and we presented our first Paul Harris Fellow at our changeover, which was exciting for the club. We haven't, other than one specific event, which I'll tell you about, we haven't deliberately fundraised for the Rotary Foundation, but I am keen that we at least make a contribution each year. An event here in our district called the Polio Ute Relay, where there's this big ute that has polio, and Rotary sort of plastered all over the side of it, and goes all around the district, visits every club, and every club has an opportunity to have an event, a fundraiser. We hosted the Polio Utes. If you go on our Facebook page, you can go and find pictures of what we did. Got all the polio shirts, and we had a massive day at Bunnings, where they were great. They allowed us to put the ute right out the front, put all our banners up, go around shaking cans, and we raised about $1,300 for polio at that event. So, I class that as Rotary Foundation because it is going into the polio fund. So whilst, we're not flushed with funds, but we're not going to be one of these clubs that raises all these tens of thousands of dollars and sits it in a bank to sort of, for a rainy day. The money that comes in sort of goes out fairly quickly. So we don't stockpile money, but it would always be a priority for me at least that we make sure that we get $1,000 or $2,000 to the foundation each year.
Fine, thanks, Mark. A question about club governance from Terry. Does the club have a board of directors, and does it use the committee system?
Yes, we do have a board of directors, and no, we don't strictly have a committee system. The board of our club is pretty much would look like the same as the board of almost any other club. We do have one position which is probably a bit new, and I did mention the word partnerships before. and we have a partnerships director, and that's the guy Ian, who's the marketing guru I spoke to before. He just spends so much time, and he's happy to do it, going out talking to businesses about how we can work together, not just businesses, but other NGOs, that sort of thing. So he works on all our partnerships, and he's just, he was born to do that job. So that's an interesting sort of position that we have that probably you might not have heard of. Now, just getting back to the whole committee thing, it's interesting how it's evolved. I was, as the instigator of the club, I was keen to leave behind a lot of Rotary traditions, but also, not throw the baby out with the bathwater and keep some of the important things as far as structure and governance, and let it sort of evolve how the members wanted it to. What we do with our committees, it's more of an ad hoc sort of thing. For example, someone comes up with an idea, they want to do a project, and they'll say, who's interested, who's going to help me with this? And 4 or 5 hands will go up. So they'll form a special committee just for that project. And after that project, it may disband. Now, they may do that function again or event or whatever it is the following year and call for a new committee again. So, we don't actually have a youth committee, but our youth chair just has a few members in the club that really are passionate about youth stuff, and they help her out every now and then. It's a bit chaotic, to be honest. It would certainly be seen that way from a traditional Rotary standpoint, but it seems to work. We do work very hard at trying to make sure that no one's left behind and no one hasn't got anything to do. But I would suggest we have far more hands-on activities than the average club. And at those hands-on activities, and when you throw in the fundraising barbecues, that sort of thing, there is a very good rotation of all the members doing stuff. So even though they're not sitting on a specific committee, they are contributing in an important way, in other ways. So that is something we perhaps need to review. But what we're doing at the moment seems to be working okay.
Fine, thanks, Mark. I do have another question here, but just before I do ask this one, if I could issue a final call for questions from the audience, please, because we have been going for 3/4 of an hour now, and that was the time we indicated we might take. But back to Michael's question, and this is an interesting one too. What is your target number of members?
It's a good question. I have a figure in my head that I think 40 is a fairly healthy club, and I think I always have. I don't know where that figure comes from, but with 28 at the moment, we are. It's a bit hard to explain. I really think the sky's the limit, and we can just keep doing new stuff. It's something really special that's a bit hard to explain, and I think it's more about. I've always thought it's a bit more about quality than quantity, to be honest. And in a club of 10 members, if they're all giving 100%, that's probably more effective than a club of 20 where half of them don't turn up with anything, sort of thing. So, but we are the biggest club around, for a long, long way around us. I think we can certainly get to 40. I don't have any doubts about that. I mean, if we really did try to recruit, we probably could bring more people in. But I don't think we need to grow too quickly, too big too quickly either. We've got to bring people in stages, not in big, in like 10 at a time sort of thing. It might overwhelm things. You've got to remember, with a traditional club, when you bring people in, a good percentage of the club generally has a fairly sound Rotary sort of background. So you're bringing people into a reasonably good average of Rotary intelligence, for want of a better term. When you've got a new club, when you've got 4 or 5 people who know Rotary fairly well and another 25 who don't, you do have to be cautious about bringing a lot of people in and trying to convey that knowledge and build up that Rotary knowledge base. So we've just got to be a little bit careful about, you're not putting a cap on it, but not wanting to grow too big too quickly.
Understandable. Well, here's a follow-up question. What's the figure in your head? That was 40, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. A question from Mark. Well, there's another couple of questions have come in here, Mark. So You may not get away for a little while yet, mate.
Oh, I'm happy to. Believe me, I could talk all night.
Excellent.
You might not want to listen all night.
Don't we know that? Don't we know that? Here we go. A question from another Mark. Is the club interested in a community event for Adelaide? Perth Ramble is keen on sharing its IP for other clubs to run a Ramble event.
Just send us the details, and we'll have a look at it. One thing we just need to be aware of is that we're actually, when you talk about Adelaide, people are probably thinking of the CBD, which is actually quite some way from where we are. We're a long way down south. We've got to be careful we're not trying to run things that are right in the middle of Adelaide when we're a community sort of 45 minutes south of Adelaide. But depending on what it is, if we can work with other clubs, there may be something. So I'm certainly open to suggestion, and Kero's got my contact details. So if anyone wants to send me some information, I'm happy to share it around the club and see what comes of it.
Fine, thanks, Mark. Looks like we might have our last question here, but there could be more on the way. How many hours do you think you spend doing stuff compared to hours spent in planning/governance meetings? That's a question from Paul.
That's a really good question, Paul, and I'll just share with you a bit of a concept that I have, or something I've been talking about in Rotary conversations when I was membership chair for quite a time. I believe, and I've actually got a whole presentation on this, but not at the moment. I actually believe the most important resource a Rotary club has is the time that their members are prepared to commit. Some people put in a lot of time, some people don't put a lot. You've all got those members that are the first ones to turn up and the last ones to leave. But however generous your members are with their time, that is a finite resource. We need to understand that. So I think it is incumbent upon Rotary clubs, particularly when we're trying to get new people in that are very busy. I think it's incumbent upon us that we respect that time and use it as effectively and productively as we possibly can. So to answer your question, I mentioned before, our meetings are not about entertainment. They're not there to hear a guest speaker, unless, of course, as I mentioned, they are there to directly help the club with something. Our meetings are productive. We're either talking about events coming up or planning things or getting new ideas, brainstorming, or we're combining a meeting with a project. So we are very keen not to be spending our valuable time of our volunteers sitting around chicken schnitzels at meetings. Yes, of course, there's a fellowship and camaraderie element of that, which is important. I don't doubt that at all. And I've never said meetings are unimportant. We do need to have them, but we need to be productive with them. And if I was asked, I've come from a traditional club where I spent 19 of my 20 years, which met every week at the same place and ate the same food and listened to pretty much the same speakers. If someone asked me, did I enjoy my time in that club, I'd say absolutely yes. If someone asked me, did I enjoy most of the speakers, the camaraderie, the friendship, the conversations, absolutely yes, no doubt. But here's the clicker, and this is what people have to understand. If someone asked me, was that the most productive use of my volunteer hours? Well, I'm sorry, I can't say yes. So ask that question of yourselves and ask that question of your members in your meetings and see what response you get. And I think you'll suddenly realise that we are spending too much of our volunteer hours sitting around in meetings doing admin stuff when we need to be out there doing volunteering and getting stuff done and you're making a direct contribution to the community. So that's a very long answer to a very short question, but it is minimal is the answer. It's very small hours of mind power and admin compared to actually the doing stuff.
I think you explained it pretty well, though, Mark.
Yeah, good.
It does look as though that's okay. That's okay. It does look as though the question pool has been drained for the moment. So at this stage, hang on. We have another one. What would be your annual service hours? I guess that's a total for the club.
That's a bit sort of how long is a piece of string. Look, I honestly don't know. if I was a good Rotarian and filling out all those things on Rotary Club Central, I should just be able to spit that out. But I can guarantee it's proportion much higher than the average club. Oh, gee whiz, it'd have to be, you know, if you just do the man hours sort of thing, it'd have to be 20 hours a week. It'd have to be 1,000 hours a year, I guess. That's just right off the top of my head. I could actually study that, but it would be lots. It would be a hell of a lot.
Certainly for a club of 28, the projects list that you share and that Ian shares regularly is lengthy and varied. So it would add up to a lot, I would think.
And we love it. And you know what? Another thing I'll just say is that I have many times in my past Rotary life been mentally exhausted by Rotary, and I'm sure Kero, as a district position holder, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I find myself with Seaford more physically exhausted. I'll be honest, I'm not in the best condition, but I have, without a shadow of a doubt, I've done more hands-on work in the last 1 year at Seaford than in all of my 19 years in my former club. And I say that without a shadow of a doubt. We do not stop, and there's a lot of hard yakka, but we love it.
Well, I just make the observation that if we had most of our members talking about their Rotary the way you spoke about yours a moment ago, we wouldn't need any elaborate recruitment methodology. We would have people knocking on the door.
That's the plan, Kero. That's the plan.
And I think it's working well at Seaford. So it does look, and I've got, I suppose I better say this quickly before another question, Bob. So it does look as though that there are no further questions. So I'll call an end to the webinar session.
Kero,
just before we do,
Kero, if anyone does have a question at any time, you can forward it to me, and I'll help you out with it. No trouble whatsoever.
Absolutely. Oh, hang on. What have we got here? A thank you from Mark. There's been a couple of thank yous in the system. So just before we close, a quick ad for another webinar that's coming up. Past Governor and Membership Lead Jessie Harmon is presenting our next Membership Voice webinar this coming Sunday. It's on the topic of engaging modern volunteers and understanding why people volunteer and having a support group of volunteers who may not want to join is pretty important. So that's a hot topic webinar. And Jessie's going to be presenting a webinar at 10 a.m. Western Standard Time, at 12:30 in Adelaide and 1 o'clock in the East. But just before we do close, a huge thank you to Mark Huddleston for his excellent presentation tonight. So well done there, Mark.
My pleasure.
And thank you to all in our audience. Please be back on Sunday for our for Jessie's webinar, because I think that's a big one too. So good night, everyone.